Hello, my sweet summer children. I'm back with some juice to get you through the long night, and the night is long, dark, and full of terrors. And guess what? It's time for episode 2 of Overwatched. All of the Overwatch episodes will be compiled onto one playlist for your easy access. And today I will be dissecting season 1, episode 2, The Kingsroad, with my special guest, mythical and astronomy extraordinaire, the Dragon LML.
Hey, Gray, what's up? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back. And I can't really think of a better episode to have you on for.
I think I begged you to be on this episode, if I recall correctly.
I let you pick it. I let you pick what episode you wanted. This is what you picked. But this was the perfect episode for you. So, season 1, episode 2, The Kingsroad, covers A Game of Thrones chapters 10 through 18, and then chapter 24 for Daenerys. I feel like in this episode there's a lot of legend circulating. Also, the dire wolves are central in this episode. But we open up on the Dothraki Sea, and this is where the Ghostgrass legend comes into play. If you haven't seen my video on Ghostgrass, check that out. I'll link it at the top.
Yeah, I love the Ghostgrass. On the rewatch, I was reminded again of how they included that legend from the books, and I just love that they included that one. It's such a fun legend.
Yeah, it really is. And I honestly think it's a metaphor for White Walkers. Ghostgrass.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that was my conclusion too. What's cool about the Ghostgrass is it actually combines the symbolism of the others and dawn, because they're stalks of milkgrass, but they're actually blades of grass. They use the word stalk, but it's called grass. So each stalk of grass is a blade. It's made of milkglass, and it's taller than a man, and they glow with ghost light.
Yeah.
So we've got glowing milkglass blades. That sounds exactly like Dawn. And of course, I have long believed that Dawn of House Dane is actually the sword, the original sword known as the Ice of House Stark, and that it has some sort of tie to the others and ice magic.
Quick question. One of my commenters left a comment about ice. And to me, it was interesting. You know, ice is like insanely huge.
The Valyrian steel ice. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's a great sword, just like Dawn is.
So do you think that it once possibly could have belonged to a giant?
Well, no, because it was made in Valyria, and supposedly, 400 years ago. And I do think that George is hinting at the idea of giant people in the past that wielded these big swords, but ice itself, it would be a modern sword, and so that wouldn't be the case. But I think that question is right on the money as far as like, why does George keep showing us these giant swords? Like, there are giants in the past that aren't like the giants that we see that are kind of hairy and dumb. I think there's something in between. Like in the world of Ice and Fire, we hear about the Lengi and the Sarnori and the maze makers of Lorath, who are all 7 to 8 feet tall, associated with magic and mystery, and they've kind of vanished from the earth. So, I don't want to go too far afield, but there's definitely your questioner, I think, is on the money in a general sense.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's an awesome question. I never thought about that. So in the Dothraki Sea, Daenerys is just having a hard time. There's like a culture shock aspect. There's also this part where she is kind of like a sex slave. She doesn't enjoy it. She's suicidal. Like, it's not as fairy tale-ish as it seems on the show.
Yeah, it's the show kind of touches on it. They obviously, it's got that one really upsetting scene where you see Drogo behind her and she's crying and he's taking her kind of forcefully. And it shows her riding, and she's obviously struggling and looking famished, and she's complaining about the horse meat. But you're right, it really doesn't come close to capturing the scene from the books. And so you asked me to go ahead and pull this quote, and I have it here. It's from Daenerys' 3rd chapter of A Game of Thrones, and it's definitely fills out the picture a little bit that the show was sort of touching on. So here it comes. It says, "At first it had not come easy. The Khalasar had broken camp the morning after her wedding, moving east towards Vaes Dothrak, and by the 3rd day Dany thought she was going to die. Saddle sores opened on her bottom, hideous and bloody. Her thighs were chafed raw, her hands blistered from the reins, the muscles of her legs and back so racked with pain that she could scarcely sit. By the time dusk fell, her handmaids would need to help her down from her mount. Even the nights brought no relief. Khal Drogo ignored her when they rode, even as he had ignored her during their wedding, and spent his evenings drinking with his warriors and blood riders, racing his prize horses, watching women dance and men die. Dany had no place in these parts of his life. She was left to sup alone or with Sir Jorah and her brother, and afterward to cry herself to sleep. Yet every night, sometime before the dawn, Drogo would come to her tent and wake her in the dark, to ride her as relentlessly as he rode his stallion. He always took her from behind, Dothraki fashion, for which Dany was grateful. That way her lord husband could not see the tears that wet her face, and she could use her pillow to muffle her cries of pain. When he was done, he would close his eyes and begin to snore softly, and Dany would lie beside him, her body bruised and sore, hurting too much for sleep. And to punctuate all that, it says, day followed day, and night followed night, until Dany knew she could endure not a moment longer. She would kill herself rather than go on, she decided one night.
It was awful.
Yeah.
It was awful for Daenerys. I think the book captures it better. I mean, that's with everything. The book's going to capture those kind of things better. But she had a hard time. She had a hard time adjusting. She finally did adjust, but you don't see it. She has these dreams. And this particular dream, she has one before her wedding, which kind of scares her. Mm-hmm. It's like Viserys. Viserys is in the dream, and it's scary to her. And then she has the second dragon dream, which is shortly after this quote. And she wakes up better and new, and each day gets easier and easier for her.
Yes, absolutely. And so the whole theme of this chapter is that of this chapter and this episode, when the chapter we're talking about is Dany 3 that we were just reading from, is that it's a turning point for Dany where she begins to find her own identity. Instead of being dominated in the bedroom, she begins to take control, and that turns into a much better experience for her. She begins to assert herself as Khaleesi. She learns how to ride and then gains respect from all the Dothraki by being able to ride, because they respect strength and they respect skill with horses and the ability to adapt. And then you start to see this really big dichotomy with her and Viserys. She wears the Dothraki clothes and adapts where he does not. He begins to stick out. The Dothraki lose all respect for him. But the point you were making is that the turning point is this dragon dream in the books, where it was the next paragraph in the narrative that I was just reading talks about this dream where, you know, it's her second dragon dream, and this time she's not afraid. There's no Viserys, and it's just the dragon and her. The dragon roasts her in fire, but she feels bathed and transformed. And then all of a sudden the next day, it wasn't as bad, and she has a little more strength, and everybody starts noticing and asking her, oh, you know, what's wrong, you know? And she was, you know, are you sick? And she's like, no, I was sick, and now I'm great. So it's the pivotal turning point, and the show basically touches on that by showing the dragon's eggs. When it has that awful scene of Drogo behind her, taking her forcefully, she's crying for a minute, and then she looks up and catches sight of the dragon eggs, and then gains this look of resolve and smiles a little bit. And so it's the beginning of her taking this identity of the dragon, and that's where she gets her strength from, essentially.
Yeah. So in Winterfell, Tyrion wakes up in a pigsty, with Joffrey and the Hound over him. But actually, in the books, he's not like waking up drunk in a pigsty. He's actually been up all night reading a 100-year-old book from the Winterfell Library that's about the changing of seasons. And the Winterfell Library is actually pretty robust. It has Valyrian scrolls and everything in there. And it actually is burned later in the episode.
Yeah, we can only hope that some of the books that Tyrion checked out of the library and brought to the wall with him were the important ones. You know, because I get upset every time books are burned, even in fiction.
Do you think like whatever was saved of the Winterfell library, was any of it saved? Do they even say like if it was completely burned down? I can't remember.
I'm not sure if it was, but we are definitely told that Tyrion checked out several books. One is that book about the turning of the seasons. Another one is a book about dragons. He's specifically looking for like the very old books, the exact ones that we would want. So I think that if there was a key book at Winterfell Library, Tyrion definitely saved it. And it's either at Castle Black or it's with Tyrion. And of course, Castle Black has its own library that's super old too.
Yeah. Do you think in season 8 we could see like Samuel Tarley having a field day in the Winterfell library?
Absolutely. Like you're saying, that does make a lot of sense for them to preserve at least a few books for him to find. So he doesn't have to go all the way back to Castle Black to look for books.
Yeah, because I feel like Sam is kind of like the researcher and Bran is kind of like Google.
Didn't didn't Sam steal a few books from the Citadel too on the way out?
Yeah, he did.
So we could just keep looking through those books too.
And I know, I think you had tweeted about this, like during season 8, there was a book that was open that Sam was looking at in the locked section of the Phases of the Moon.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was not only the phases of the moon, it was actually showing the mechanics of an eclipse. Specifically, it's showing the moon in different positions and where it has to be to create an eclipse, which is, of course, a big part of my theory.
So the next scene is a scene of much debate. And it's when Catelyn is in Bran's sick room and Cersei comes in to comfort her and tell her about her little black-haired beauty of a son that she had that died.
So this is a perfect foreshadowing for how Game of Thrones basically goes off the rails every time they try to do something wildly different from the books, because the first season is almost straight out of the books, except for this one scene in this episode, and it's just like, huh, what?
Right.
Or Tyrion waking up in the pigsty. I guess that was a change too.
Well, there's one other scene, I think it's like in episode 5, of Cersei and Robert talking. But all of these 2 scenes that are added are focusing around Lena Headey, the actress that plays Cersei. The showrunners really like her, and they like to showcase her.
That's exactly the vibe I got when we were watching it. Is like, it doesn't really fit Cersei's character, but the acting's really good. And
really?
So they just haven't figured out exactly where they're going with Cersei. And of course, that's one of the big criticisms of the show, is that season to season, the characters aren't that consistent. But Lena Headey is consistently awesome with her acting. So it's one of those things where it doesn't make sense, but at least you can enjoy the scene just as a vignette because it is well acted.
Yeah. So another thing that they added was Jon and Jaime. Basically, Jaime, it felt like to me, Jaime's mocking Jon for joining the Night's Watch.
Yeah, I love the Jaime actor, and so all the Jaime taunting that we can get, I'm a fan of. I thought it was pretty well done. Jon's kind of stiff, he's pissed off, he doesn't know quite sure what Jaime's intimating, but he knows he's supposed to take offense, and Jaime's toying with him. It's pretty good. Yeah. So those scenes that are added, those are good. So we got Nymeria. We got Jon and Arya's goodbye, and Jon gives Arya Needle. And I think this is a pivotal point in Arya's story, because Arya has Needle for the rest of the books, and throughout the books and in the show, when you see her hide Needle, when the many-faced god people tell her to get rid of Needle, basically Needle is Winterfell to Arya, and that's what keeps Arya. Like, that's how she doesn't forget who she is, and she doesn't lose who she is when she's changing all of these faces, because she discards all of her property, but never Needle. Yeah, she even compares it to Jon Snow's smile, quote unquote, in the books. So it absolutely represents her Stark identity, and yeah, it goes into hiding when she goes into the House of Black and White, where she's supposed to become no one, but she doesn't really become no one. She's still warging Nymeria at night, becoming the Night Wolf in the Riverlands, and she still knows that she's Arya Stark, and the Faceless Men know that too.
Yeah.
And Needle is very much symbolic of that. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, so that's a big scene for me. It's one of my favorite scenes.
It is. It's really touching.
It's kind of weird when you think about like that original outline, and that scene gets creepy.
No, we don't have to talk about that.
So I think this is going to be interesting for me to talk to you about this, because most of the time when we talk about like mythology and symbolism and White Walkers, but I don't ever get to talk to you about like character motives and things like that.
Yep.
Or why characters are the way they are. And Catelyn Stark, she's not my favorite character. And Maybe you can help me understand. Do you like her?
Well, I'd like her character more in the books. I think the show, the actress is good, but the show makes her really brittle and insufferable at times. At other times she does well. But yeah, they make her easy to dislike in the show. I feel like it's more nuanced in the books. There's more good moments to sort of outweigh her bad moments, or at least balance them out.
Yeah.
And you appreciate, what's going on a little more. In the books, she's kind of the quintessential mother character trying to protect her children. And she's actually the better political player between her and Ned. And I find her character very interesting in the books. In the show, I get why people are chafe about it, especially in this episode.
Yeah.
She's kind of insufferable in this episode. But again, you'd also have to remember, like, picture your 7-year-old child in a coma with broken legs and you're not sleeping and stuff. Like, you'd act a little deranged. I mean, that's to be expected, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I just could never get on board with her. Even in the books, like, I liked her in A Storm of Swords, and then like she died, and I'm like, damn, I just started liking her. So,
and then she became a zombie.
then she became Lady Stoneheart, and I was like, oh man, hope she never bumps into John because he's good as gone.
In a tough position, man. I mean, it's tough being a mother in a medieval world, and there's such a high rate of mortality, and you're just trying to keep some of your kids alive to adulthood, and you start to do extreme things. And you see the same thing with Cersei's character. It's like, at the end of the day, she's trying to preserve her power and her kids, and she's doing it in a narcissistic way, but it's still like, I'll do anything to protect my kids. It's that bear mother goddess kind of thing.
Yeah, so I mean, to each their own. You can love her, you can hate her. Let us know in the comments how you feel about Catelyn Stark. So one of the most heartbreaking scenes for me is, you are Stark, you might not have my name, but you have my blood.
Yeah.
And when Jon asks about his mother, and he says, we'll talk about your mother when I come back, I promise. And he never comes back. That is so heartbreaking.
It sure is.
But I do think that that he says that he doesn't say you're my son. You don't have my name, but you're my son. The fact that he says that you have my blood, I feel like is definitely R plus L equals J. Yeah,
there's a lot of RLJ foreshadowing in this episode. There's that one, and then there's the whole conversation between Robert and Ned, where first Robert is asking who's John's mother, and Ned is like, Willa, I don't want to talk about her. And then they immediately shift to talking about Dany and Robert wanting to kill Targaryens. And Ned's like, well, this is one you can't get your hands on.
Yes.
That's exactly the thing that he was doing by protecting Jon.
Yes.
Keeping Jon from Robert's wrath.
Yeah, Robert is really obsessed with killing Targaryens. And I think that's why, well, I know that's why Ned could never reveal who Jon was. Because even as much as Robert loved Ned, he would have wanted to kill Jon, and then Jon also would have been revealed to be the heir of the throne. But and
that's why George wrote the scene with the wolves in so closely too, because we're showing you like Robert passes the death sentence on Lady when Ned doesn't want him to, and that's a microcosm of like what might have happened.
Yeah,
with Ned being like, no, don't kill Jon, and Robert's like, tough, buddy.
Right. So Robert says there's a war coming, and he was right. So
Jamie talks about not wanting to be a cripple or a deformed person.
Yeah, and a grotesque, and then he is one. Then he turns out to be one.
And they even zoom in on his hand when he shakes hands with Jon. It's like this long close-up of Jamie's hand. And I was
they do that. I'll have to add that in this video. I forgot all about that. It's not in my notes. So Tyrion and Jon are on the road to the wall, which this journey is a lot longer than one episode, but you know, it's TV. So Jon is actually starting to see what's really good with the Night's Watch. Like, they've picked up rapers along the way, and Tyrion is kind of telling him like, these are your brothers. Like, it's not going to be all men like your uncle. It's like, these are your Night's Watch brothers, rapers and thieves. And basically Tyrion is the only one that keeps it real with him about where he's going.
Yeah, and later on we see that Jon realizes that was the case and says to Tyrion, "You were the only one who gave it to me straight." And you can see that Jon ends up respecting Tyrion for that. Yeah, and Tyrion in turn respects Jon for being able to accept a hard truth, as he says.
Yeah, and that's why, like, in season 7, I was really excited to see that reunion because I felt like they were going to have a good relationship because they had a good relationship anyway. But it's more of, like, we hear legends. We hear more legends about the White Walkers. We heard that at breakfast with Tyrion when he's like teasing Tommen and Myrcella. He's talking about at the wall that he might see some White Walkers or something. I forget the exact words.
Oh, and then there's also foreshadowing when Jon is saying goodbye to Bran and he says, "Oh, maybe we can go walking beyond the wall if you're not scared." And of course, Bran does go beyond the wall, and so does Jon.
Yes. And so we have that, and then we have like Grumpkins and Snarks, where they're just like everything, all of the legends are played to be like their jokes. Like, no one believes in these legends anymore. Everything is Grumpkins and Snarks, and if it's Grumpkin and Snarks, then that's like an insult. Like when Tyrion is telling Jon, "Oh, you're gonna go guard the wall from Grumpkins and Snarks," that's something that doesn't exist.
Well, that's the whole point of the prologue, or I guess the first scene in the TV show, where you see the others first, and then they disappear, but it just tells you that magic is real. But he scoffs at Grumpkins and Snarks later, you know that they're probably wrong, and that, of course, magic is real. And plus, I mean, it's fantasy, so if you don't realize that the people scoffing at magic are wrong, then maybe this is your first fantasy. I don't know, but magic is real. Newsflash. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. A lot of magic in A Song of Ice and Fire. So the cat's ball happens. The guy comes to kill Bran, and Catelyn isn't missing any fingers. I feel like she should be missing fingers. Like, even in the books, I feel like she should be missing fingers.
She really should be, yeah. I mean, I guess, it always depends on like how they're struggling over it and stuff. But yeah, it's hard to see how Valyrian steel didn't just cut through her fingers. But nevertheless, setting that aside, I mean, that's like the midichlorian stuff. I mean, we can't quibble about that kind of stuff. The scene is really good, and this is where you start to respect and like Catelyn, because she's kind of a badass here. I mean, it takes guts to grab a fucking knife,
especially a Valyrian steel one.
Right, and she's defending her son with her bare hands against a man who's stronger than her and armed with a knife. So that's pretty awesome, and she does her best. And then, of course, the wolf comes in, and this leads to a big transition with Catelyn, where she now realizes the wolves are important. She allows the wolf to sleep with Bran. She's later telling Robb before the Red Wedding, trust your wolf. So again, that also makes Catelyn more likable when you see her start to appreciate the dire wolves and the magic of the North. So
yeah, that is one thing that is likable about Catelyn Stark, that she does respect the old gods, and she does know that the wolves, or she does think that the wolves were sent from the old gods. So if you don't know who sent the cat's ball, it was Joffrey. Did you know that? Yeah. I didn't know that. I didn't know.
Well, I didn't like figure it out on first read. I mean, but eventually I got around to looking at all the theories, and it seems obvious.
Well, I saw it confirmed in the supposed canon app. Because
it's basically confirmed in the narrative. It's just not explicitly said, but Tyrion's inner monologue basically spells it out.
I had no idea that it was Joffrey. So it was Joffrey. That's confirmed. So the reason this episode is perfect for LML is because of this. It's the scene with Daenerys where Doria tells her the moon, where dragons come from. They're talking about dragon legends.
The moon was an egg, Khaleesi. Once there were 2 moons in the sky, but one wandered too close to the sun and cracked from the heat. So this is where the myth starts to sound like nonsense. They're like, oh, so the moon just wandered into the sun. That doesn't sound like anything that can happen. But of course, if you think about the way an eclipse looks, it looks exactly like the moon is wandering too close to the sun. So that's something that eclipses are very unique and have received special treatment in mythology all around the world. There's a lot of really interesting myths about eclipses, but the point is they're often cataclysmic. It's like the moon swallowing the sun, things like that. There's a lot of cool myths. And essentially when it says that there were two moons and one wandered too close to the sun, that's the eclipse portion of this. And there's a whole bunch of other eclipse symbolism to support that's in my podcast. But then it says that the moon cracked from the heat and 1,000 dragons poured forth and drank the fire of the sun. Now, my big discovery that started me writing essays and making podcasts was that in some mythologies around the world, meteors and comets are remembered as dragons or fiery flying snakes. And that's easy to see why, because comets fly through the air and they're fiery, and when they land, they cause a big boom and a fiery destruction. And dragons obviously fly and breathe fire and land with destruction and burn everything. So it's kind of intuitive. And there's from South Africa to South America to China to the Middle East to India, it's a very common idea that comets can be seen as dragons. So one day when I was thinking about this, it was like, oh, well, if a moon cracked or got hit by something, or if there was any sort of celestial catastrophe of any kind, it's very likely that you could get bits of rock falling down to the earth, and that those would be like a meteor shower, and it would look like 1,000 dragons pouring forth, out of the sky. And so that's what this myth is talking about. There's some sort of celestial alignment and eclipse, and then there was some sort of collision, maybe the red comet was flying around, who knows, and then we got a meteor shower. And of course, when you start to think about what caused the long night, a big meteor impact is one of the things that could actually provide a mechanism to explain that. And that's my theory, basically.
My favorite part of your theory is when you lay it out just simply as Daenerys is the moon of Khal Drogo's life. Daenerys is the moon of Khal Drogo's life, and Khal Drogo is the sun and stars. And when he in his funeral pyre, when she wanders too close to, when the moon of his life wanders too close to the sun and stars, out pops dragons. I don't think you can get any more symbolic than that. And didn't you ask George about it, like in an interview recently? Didn't you get to interview him about that?
Well, okay, so I stood in line and got to ask him one question at the at his recent speaking appearance. So my exact question to him was basically, I asked him about mythology, and I said, where did you get this great idea to parallel your little folklore stories and the scenes in your book? Like, you gave us a book's worth of Dany and Drogo calling each other sun and moon, and then you told us about a moon wandering too close to a sun to birth dragons, and then you had Dany do that very thing at the end of the book. So, like, where did you get the idea to do that kind of thing? And, if you could just make any comment about that. So that was my question. So it was kind of like trying to give him a sly wink and a nod that I was on to that theory a little bit without actually asking him about the theory. Because if you ask him about a theory, he won't answer.
Yeah.
So
what did he say?
Oh, well, he said, of course, he didn't invent that it's a classic, technique, which it is. But then he went on to talk about like how important it is and how much he likes to play with foreshadowing and dreams and things like that. And he's like, you don't want to make it too easy. He likes to have figurative interpretations. And he was sort of alluding to the idea that this myth about a moon and a sun turned out to be two people, or at least a parallel of it. So he was alluding to how he likes to do those parallels. And he also said something funny. He was like, I've almost been tempted to write a story where people's dreams don't mean anything, and then let the readers try to make sense out of it, and they don't actually mean anything. And then he pauses for a second, and then he says, but I haven't succumbed to that temptation yet. So we do know that the dreams do mean something in A Song of Ice and Fire, and he enjoys it very much. It's part of the thing.
So I do think that's awesome. Like your whole theory on the moon, meteors and stuff. That's awesome.
That was a good recap. It was a good recap. I always like listening to other people explain it to see like how much of it is sunk in. But yeah, that's exactly right. Drogo's pyre is the fire of the sun. Dany's the moon. She wanders too close to it, and the dragon's eggs crack open and dragons are born. And it's not 1,000,000, it's 3 dragons, but you know, symbolism, it's close enough.
Yeah. So, I also wanted to on the show how she has the dragon eggs. First they're like, well, they're riding around all day in the heat. It's like she's incubating them. Like when she sets them up with all those candles around them in the show, it's really pretty to look at, but it feels like she's incubating them. Like she's like, I don't know.
Well, the show is doing a good job with the setting of the scene to give you this idea that these eggs could be used in like a holy rite. She puts them in the brazier. She surrounds them with candles. They just look like a holy relic. And by presenting them in that context, it starts to clue you in about what's going to happen. So that's a really good job by the show to frame them that way. And of course, that's really in the books they do it with differently. They, you know, it's like Dany looks at the eggs and the light catches them, and it looks like there's 1,000 drops of fire floating in the sky, which is an allusion to the meteors coming from the dragon moon again. So.
And she sleeps with them too, right? Like she'll be like, "Can you hand me the green egg?" And she'll like sleep with it.
I think it was like after she woke up from her wake the dragon dream, she's like, "Bring me one of the eggs," and then falls back to sleep and wakes up again and it's warm. Yeah, so I think that's what you're talking about.
And when she's pregnant with Rhaego, she feels like the Rhaego is reaching out to the egg. Like she puts the egg between her stomach or on her stomach, and she feels like Rhaego's reaching out to the egg.
Yeah, exactly. That was a great one. That's where he's really giving you the clue that these eggs aren't dead. Yeah, that there's something in there. And a great technique that Martin uses is he gives you a scene like that, a moment like that, but then he quickly distracts you with something else, so you don't have time to think about it too much. So it's like these escalating foreshadowings of the dragons hatching are coming in Dany's chapters amidst some really intense stuff. Like, you know, they conquered that one city and the slaves are being mistreated and Dany's trying to rescue them. Or in this particular episode, she gets the prophecy about the dragons waking and the second moon and stuff while she's talking to Dorea about lovemaking tricks, so that she can turn the bedroom with Khal Drogo to her favor, essentially. And so, you know, he always hides the prophecy and the magic behind the bushes of the main plot, which is always really gripping. And to sort of harp on the thing we were saying earlier about Dany, you know, having a rough time at first and then drawing strength from her dragon identity, it's no coincidence that this prophecy about dragons coming from the moon is given to Dany at the same time that she's getting these lessons about sex so that she can take power in the relationship. So both of these things, again, it's tying the dragon identity to Dany's taking power, which I just think is a really cool theme.
Yeah, and you know what I just thought about? When she puts that dragon egg up to her stomach, I think it says like Rhaego was reaching out to the stone dragon locked inside the egg or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
So that's like a nod to Azor Ahai, just saying.
Okay, great. So yeah, this is such a great scene. Let's give him the actual quote. It says, "Eerie fetched the egg with the deep green shell, bronze flecks shining amidst its scales as she turned it in her small hands. Dany curled up on her side, pulling the sand silk cloak across her and cradling the egg in the hollow between her swollen belly and small tender breasts. She liked to hold them. They were so beautiful, and sometimes just being close to them made her feel stronger, braver, as if somehow she were drawing strength from the stone dragons locked inside. She was lying there, holding the egg, when she felt the child move within her, as if he were reaching out, brother to brother, blood to blood. 'You are the dragon,' Dany whispered to him, 'the true dragon. I know it. I know it.' And she smiled and went to sleep dreaming of home."
I got chills. I got chills from that.
I had overlooked the stone dragon phrase, but you're right. That's exactly the Azor Ahai thing, is waking dragons from stone. And here it is, you know, beginning to wake.
Yeah. Love it. I really think if there's an Azor Ahai, it's her, but I won't get caught up on that.
Everyone's Azor Ahai.
Everyone.
But yes,
The Night King could totally be, but I won't get caught up on that either.
Well, I do have a couple of theories about the original Night King's connection to Azor Ahai on my channel. If anybody's curious, that would be the Moons of Ice and Fire and Blood of the Other series, which you can find at the Lucifer Means Lightbringer YouTube channel. I'm a big fan of that theory. I think there's all kinds of connections between the others and the dragon-blooded people.
So we get to see how awful Joffrey is at the end at the crossroads. I actually watched Game of Thrones. I tried to get my mom to watch it. So I got her able to get past episode 1. But it took me a while to get her to watch it again after episode 2. And it wasn't the direwolf, it was the butcher's boy. She could not get over the butcher's boy for like, it took her like another year to watch it again. And I'm like, Mom, you sweet summer child. You haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, it's a double whammy. It really drives home the cruelty of this world. While Ned is walking out to execute the wolf, the Hound rides in. And it's like, oh yeah, he just casually rode down a young teenage boy. And it's not going to be a big deal. He's not going to get in trouble for that. It shows you the justice. It's like, oh, well, you bite the king's arm a little bit. And we're gonna have high justice, and we're gonna execute the wolf and treat the child like a criminal and all this. But then the butcher's boy, there'll be no justice for him. He's just ridden down by Sandor needlessly, and we'll never hear anything else about it. So it's definitely a hard lesson.
Yeah, very. And it was like Arya was missing for 4 days after Nymeria bit Joffrey and Arya threw his sword in the river. She was missing for 4 days, and they find her. She comes back. Joffrey's story, of course, Joffrey's lying. But Ned knows. Sansa's already told Ned what happened. But then in front of the queen and everyone, Sansa's like, oh, I don't remember. I didn't see. And I think that's where a lot of people have issues with Sansa. That she didn't take up for her sister. That she didn't tell the truth. I understand kind of why she didn't. She had to lie because of Joffrey. She was supposed to marry Joffrey, and she would have been calling him a liar, basically in open court. So I get it. I still don't love Sansa. Still don't really like Sansa.
Yeah, the way that it happened in the books does a little bit better job of making you sympathize with how Sansa is caught in between. In the show, I noticed what Sansa is doing in the moment while it's going down. She seems more concerned for Joffrey getting bit than for Joffrey swinging a sword at Arya, which seems really fucked up. I don't know that that's really the case in the books. In the books, it really is a matter of like Sansa is betrothed to Joffrey and has to live with him for the rest of her life. And there's a lot riding on this alliance. So she's right to place a lot of weight on that alliance and not be quick to just throw Joffrey under the bus. And she's been fighting with her sister. And of course, when you're young, sometimes you can really hate your sisters or brothers in the heat of the moment. So I think it's understandable what happened. And she didn't lie. She just kind of copped out. She was like, I don't know. I can't remember. But dude, I mean, who hasn't done that as a kid when like you didn't want to say what happened? I mean, to me, that's really good writing. The show just made it a little less sympathetic. But again, the show doesn't have as much time to set up the nuance of these scenes. You have to use your imagination a little bit. But it's a well-written scene. Like, just because it's a small drama, it's like it starts with kids quarreling and then spills into this thing with Ned and Cersei and Robert confronting each other. And I just think it's a really good way to take a simple thing and use it to show everyone's character and foreshadow where the story is going.
Yeah, I agree. I think I can almost 99% say that if Sansa knew that Lady would die if she didn't tell the truth, I think she would have told the truth. If she knew it meant losing her direwolf, I think she would have told the truth.
Well, and that's part of the lesson that's being taught to Sansa too. Like because Sansa, her arc is a lot about lying. She's forced to lie at King's Landing. Peter Baelish tries to teach her how to lie. There's all this stuff about lying and when lying is okay. She's lying to Sweet Robin, telling him lies, to to keep him calm or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is beginning. It's a sort of, like I said, encapsulating her arc. She lied and ultimately, or she didn't lie, but she omitted the truth, which is almost the same. And it came back to bite her. She lost her wolf.
Yeah.
And she lost her identity. So that sort of tells you, like, to get her Stark identity back, she's got to reconcile herself with the truth, right?
Right. Which I have this theory that the direwolves kind of mirror the paths of all the Starks. And because I feel like that Sansa's not going to make it out of season 8 alive. Because
I'll fight you on that one. I think she's going to be the last one standing, but go ahead.
You think she's going to be the queen?
I think she's going to be queen in the North, not of the Iron Throne. But yeah, I do think she'll be the head of House Stark. Because in the books, I don't think Jon's going to be able to procreate when he gets resurrected.
Because his resurrection is he's going to be a lot more like...
It's going to be gnarlier, right?
Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
He's going to be like a wolf man.
I don't see Jon in the books, like, carrying on House Stark. I think that will be Sansa and whoever she marries, but we'll see.
Oh, I think that she's gonna die because I think I actually think like how Lady died in the place in Nymeria, that Sansa's gonna die in the place of Arya, some kind of way, and possibly at the hands of a Stark, like Lady died. I go into a lot more detail in another video, so you could check that out, everybody watching, and you can check it out too. And then you can debate me about it. Then we can fight about it. Sure. But that episode was really good. It ended with Ned killing Lady and Bran waking up from his coma. We didn't get to see the cool coma dream. I don't know how they would have done that on TV.
That would have looked like the never-ending story with like Bran falling and there's like a crow, like a talking crow, animatronics like flapping its wings, and Bran's falling and like. Yeah, that would have been cheesy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So when Ned does kill Lady, he takes her bones to Winterfell. Lady is actually buried at Winterfell. Or he doesn't take her bones. Someone takes her bones to Winterfell. But yeah, I'm just picturing Bran riding on that flying dog in the Never-Ending Story. Thanks for putting that freaking scene in my head.
Yeah, you won't unsee that one. But
right.
I do think there's an interesting thing here about butchers. So Ned and Illian Payne are contrasted against each other a lot in the books. Mm-hmm. And the first time we see Ned, he is an executioner chopping off the head of the Night's Watch Ranger. Illian Payne, of course, is an executioner. Then Illian Payne kills Ned and takes Ned's sword and uses it to execute more people. So there's all of that going on. But in the moment in the show where Ned is like, no, Illian Payne's not going to kill the wolf. I'll do it myself. The wolf is of the North. She deserves better than a butcher. So he's calling Illian Payne a butcher, and she deserves a good death. But then think about later when the Hound is talking to Sansa and he's saying, your father's a killer. Your brother's a killer. We're all killers. Your sons will be killers. The world's run by killers. Right. Yeah. And so sort of undercutting Ned's like distinction there. And it's like, well, you may have a certain amount of honor, but, and I do believe obviously Ned is honorable, but Martin is also asking us, like, well, how honorable is war? How honorable is it to execute people? And you made the point that, Ned really should not have executed the Night's Watch Ranger. I heard you make that point with Tony, like he should have listened to him and, thought about it a little harder and said, oh, what, you saw the others and you're crazy? Maybe you did see the others and that's why you're crazy. Let's investigate. Yeah.
He did kind of just like, okay, you deserted, head gone. Like there was no, it was a huge mistake. Like it could have changed everything if he just took 1 second to investigate. So do you think there's anything else that we missed that we should talk about?
Just overall, I just think it's a really gripping episode. Even knowing it all, watching it again, I was, gripped to the whole time. A lot of emotional moments, a lot of good acting. You can really tell that it's easier for them to weave between the plots when there's not so many plots. And this is true in the books too. Like once the plots they sort of bifurcate and trifurcate and you get like 47 characters and like, it's harder to keep the flow going. But this episode has a really nice flow, scene to scene. It's basically perfect, like you were saying. It's only small gripes with it. So
Yes. So I appreciate you for coming on to Overwatched. Hopefully I'll get you back on for another episode of Overwatched. But let the people know where they can find you at.
Well, all you have to do is type in Lucifer Means Lightbringer to the internet machines, and you'll find me. That's the name of my website. That's the name of my YouTube channel. It's the name of my Patreon. If you're looking for my podcast on iTunes or something, it's called The Mythical Astronomy of Ice and Fire. But there's, like I said, if you put Lucifer and Lightbringer in there, you'll find my stuff. And I've got a podcast and a blog that match, so you can read or listen as you see fit. And if you're into symbolism and mythology and any of the stuff I've been talking about, then you'll like the podcast, and come check it out and join us myth heads in the symbolism corner talking about nerdy stuff. It's fun.
Myth heads.
That's us.
Yeah, and I will link his website and his YouTube channel and everything in the description box. So all you have to do is click the description box.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say also, again, thanks for having me on. I always like to work with you. And also, I've got another channel called Between Two Weirwoods, which we, of course, did a video, the very first Between Two Weirwoods. You and Tony Teflon and Quinn from Ideas of Ice and Fire were my guest, and we debated the timeline, and we had a really lively, robust debate, I think. And so I've just moved that over and created a new channel for that. So I would like to ask everybody, if you're a fan of Gray, check out Between Two Weirwoods, and it's the number 2. So it's Between Two Weirwoods. It's a YouTube channel. The very first video is Gray's video, so give it a watch, give it an upvote. Really appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel, and I will be having Gray back on, of course, for a future panel. With I'll just keep changing up the lineups. I'll have Quinn back on sometime. I'll have Tony back on sometime, and so subscribe and get the notifications for that, so you don't miss it when Gray comes back on. Because we talk about all kinds of stuff.
Talked about the timeline, and I think we had fun. And not only did we have fun, but it's a plethora of information. So definitely check that out. I'll link that too.
Thanks, Gray, and thanks for coming on that time, and I'll look forward to having you back on.
As always, thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone that supports me on Patreon. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please click that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and join the Sweet Summer family. Okay, my sweet summer children, have a good day.